Good morning, good afternoon, bon dia, bonjour. Hello, beautiful people. And boy, do we have a show for you today. Today we have a very special guest. All our guests are very special, but this one is very, very meaningful in my life and in the life of anyone who is in the fashion industry, who got to live the 90s, especially. If you were in South Beach in the 90s, you had to know about the Versace explosion that happened during the 90s. And one of the people responsible for that explosion is our guest today, photographer Doug Ordway, a very dear friend, and he's about to share some stories with us. So without any further notice, here we go. I'm about to go get Dougie and get him on so we could have some fun. Let's see, Doug. Will be joining us momentarily. And I never used that word, momentarily. And I like that word. And there he is.
Omar, you see me? How are you, brother?
If you bello.
It's been a while.
Guarda che bello. Wow, Dougie.
Come stai, bello?
Sto benissimo,
Tutto
benissimo, felice.
bene?
So happy to do this. Oh my God, so happy that you're joining us. First and foremost, as always, Doug, thank you so much for giving us this opportunity.
Of course. Thanks to you guys. Thanks to you and Nadia.
Listen, there's so much for us to talk about.
We got a history, dude.
For those of you that are joining us, Doug is, talk about an era. What an amazing name for this segment and for this show to be called Era, because Doug, you are a very important and crucial person that defined an era. Your photos, your vibe, and what you created during the 90s. I don't believe you could mention Versace versus Versace Atelier Instante without mentioning Doug Ordway, because you were responsible for all of those campaigns. And we're about to get into that momentarily. Again, a word I've never used. First time, momentarily. I kind of like that word.
Your word of the day.
I know, right? Word of the day, momentarily. Dougie, I want to know, how did this journey begin for you? You know, how it all began for you as a photographer. First and foremost, where are you from, Doug?
Originally from a little town called Cedar Knolls, New Jersey.
Oh,
but
okay.
As soon as I was able to get to New York City, I got to New York City. Because it was very suburban life. It wasn't very inspiring. I mean, it's a good place to grow up. But as someone in your early 20s, that kind of age, you want to be somewhere else. So I luckily got a job offer. I was commuting because I was working in a catalog studio, doing kind of cheesy stuff like Bradley's and Zayre's and all those kind of really cheesy catalogs. And one of the photographers there knew Bruce Weber. So he set me up with an interview with Bruce's studio manager. And I always attribute my start with all this was given to me by a golden retriever. Because when I went to, you know how Bruce is with his golden retrievers, they're his babies. And I went into his place, and he's in one of these buildings in Tribeca that has the freight elevator that opens direct into the apartment.
I remember
so the door opens, this dog comes right at me and comes right towards me, and I grab him and start hugging him because I grew up with golden retrievers. So for me, it was very natural. So the studio manager saw me right at that moment before we even spoke. She's like, "You need to meet Bruce," because the dog liked me. So that's how I got to meet Bruce Weber, is because of his dog.
Oh, well, we all know about Bruce and his dog.
Of course. They're his children.
So that's his life. I actually had a model once who said something kind of not too cool about the dog, and he was right out the door.
Oh, I'm sure. You don't say anything bad about those dogs.
That interview literally took like a minute, and he was out the door. And he said, "Oh yeah, no, I touched his dog, and it smelled." I said, "Oh no, you did not go there."
Wrong thing to say.
So you started assisting Bruce Weber.
Well, what happened then? I was still living in New Jersey, and I was commuting to my catalog job. But Bruce, understandably insisted that I live in New York City. So I picked up and I moved into New York City.
What I tell you, one thing I've always known and experienced with Bruce Weber was his level of generosity. He was
most definitely
always so generous and treated, which we'll get back to that, but he treated his models with so much respect, treated them like movie stars, and so did you. So I know where you got it from. So tell me about that whole journey working with Bruce as an assistant.
Well, as far as his generosity, he was very generous with us also. Like if you happen to be on a trip, which we were normally, we would travel, anywhere from 8 to 10 months out of the year. We were always traveling. And if it happened to be your birthday while you were away somewhere, you would come back to your hotel room and there'd be presents, Paul Smith shirts and Agnes B pants and, photo books and all this kind of stuff all over your bed. So he was very much like that. He liked to show his appreciation for how hard we worked, because we did work hard. It was long hours.
Right.
A lot of times it was 7 days a week. But he showed the appreciation, and it made you want to work for him harder. I mean, there's a lot of, especially in that period, there's two different mentalities I felt with fashion photographers. There was either the diva that put the fear of death into you, so you would do anything possible so you wouldn't, be attacked like that. Or there was the other person, like Bruce, for example, that he was so giving and so kind that you wanted to do anything for him.
Got it. And how long did you work as Bruce's assistant?
About 3.5 years.
3.5 years.
My first trip, I was a kid from New Jersey with long hair. I had bad style. I was dressed very tacky. So there was a lot of jokes about that. But as soon as we went to Puerto Vallarta, Mexico for Calvin Klein with Josie Bahrain, Sean Thompson, and that was my first trip. And I'd never really been out of the New Jersey area. I think the furthest I went was to Massachusetts at Cape Cod on summer vacations. So for me to be, traveling like that and going to Mexico was like a big thrill. So we got there, and on one of the first nights, they were just about to launch Obsession. So we were doing the first print campaign for Obsession. And I'm sure, you know that kind of stuff. It was a lot of naked bodies and, groups of people with their clothes up, this kind of stuff. So it was one of the first nights, and we're in the swimming pool, and there's like Josie Bahrain with like 6 or 7 guys all around her, and they're all naked. I'm thinking to myself, what the fuck did I get into? What did I get into?
That's a good story.
Yeah.
That's a good story. I remember when we first met, and you kind of reminded me of it in at the Shangri-La Hotel. And these were the days. I don't really know how many male, model agents did what I used to do, but I would roll up there with 6 or 7 of my boys.
No, very few. You were one of the few that did that. And I think in that period too, we were shooting a lot on that balcony, the big terrace at the Shangri-La.
Yeah.
So that would be our base camp for like 2 months. We would shoot some editorial, we would do some film work, we'd shoot some advertising, we'd just be there. That was our home for 2 months. And all those shoots went on that terrace. And I remember specifically you coming, sitting in that dining room with this big table in the dining room, that terrace right outside. Yeah. And I remember you coming and just being a great guy,
it's very, very funny that that whole era of bringing models over to you, I would definitely, you were the guy for me to have the contact with, because Bruce was extremely busy.
And I was shooting the Polaroids of the guys.
Yeah, shared incredible stories in one-on-one conversations and situations with Bruce, but you were my guy, so I would always make sure, okay, get to Doug, let's get this guy in front of Doug, let's get the group going so he can introduce the guy to Bruce. Once Doug gets a cosign, Bruce will go, oh yeah, let's do this. And what an amazing era that was.
It was such an incredible experience. Like I said, I hadn't had many experiences as a kid from the New Jersey suburbs. So for me, all of a sudden to be thrown into this where I'm traveling the world, we were going to Rio, we went to Paris, we were in Los Angeles all the time, as I'm sure you remember. Northern California, Mexico, we went to all these great places. And prior to that, I never even had a passport. So for me, it was like, wow, this is amazing. I'm working, this is my job, and I'm working and traveling and, being a part of these photo shoots with photography has always been my passion. So to be a part of it was incredible. I was, 20. I think I started with him when I was 20.
Wow, what an amazing job to have at 20 years of age and travel the world.
Yeah, because I graduated high school at 18. Then I worked at the catalog studio when I was 19 for about a year. And then 20 is when I started with Bruce.
When you were working at the catalog studio, were you shooting pictures then?
No, I was an assistant.
You were an assistant?
I was an assistant. They had a group of photographers and each one had an assistant.
Got you. So here we go. Let's move on. Let's move forward to what I want to get into, the meat and potatoes.
Oh, here we go.
Here we go. Here we go. Let's
I don't know if I'm
ready
for you, Omar.
I really don't believe you could speak of the 90s and South Beach without Doug Ordway. I'm going to tell you a crazy, funny story, Doug. I remember models calling me from South Beach because you remember there were so many crews shooting at, at the beach, crew after crew, tons of Germans, whatever, because the lighting was so beautiful. And I remember so many models calling me saying, hey, Doug Ordway is shooting Versace out here. You think you can get me on?
Get me in?
It's all booked already. They're shooting. He goes, well, I'm just going to walk by and hoping that he sees me and he scouts me. I'm like, well, I don't know if that's really going to work. But I used to get those calls, Doug, every week after week. Guys saying, oh, yeah, Doug Ordway's going to be in South Beach. I'm just going to, probably I'll walk by his hotel and he'll take a notice of me. I'm like, no, I don't know about that. Doug, what you did during those times with the Versace campaigns and obviously Versus, Doug, how did you create that? Because, this just hit me. I never remember a photographer, other than Bruce, of course, having that many guys on a set. And how did you control all that testosterone going on in there?
Well, I kind of became known as the guy that could pull off group shots. Because group shots are not easy. They're not easy.
I imagine that.
With digital these days, you can shoot as much as you want, but you had to worry about your budgets and you didn't want to shoot more than like 7 or 8 rolls of film. But if you had a group of 12 guys, there's always going to be someone that has a bad face or they blinked or, or something happened. So, I became known as the group shot guys, the group shot guy. But you want to know how all that started? Because it started, I worked with Bruce for a bit. And then my first trip to Europe, I went to London and I was doing a bunch of tests for Select. And that's when Maurice was there. So I was working closely with Maurice, shooting all the guys. They were putting together a new book. So I was doing all the pages for the book. And then I came back. I was there for about 2 months. And I came back and I needed to earn a living. And, starting out as a photographer, you're not earning a living. You're doing photos, you're building your portfolio. So on the side, at the same time, I started working with Chris Forberg and Jenny Rose at ICE. So I would be there, and the phone calls would come in, a client would call, And I'd say, well, who's the photographer? Hint, hint. You know, to see if I could find out about if they needed photographers or not.
Right.
So I always did that. You know, I would go and work with them 5 days a week, and then I do all my shoots on the weekends. So I did that for about a year, and through ICE, I met Calvin French, who had ugly people in Milano. I mean, Calvin French is, we all know Calvin French. But Calvin French was the first person that actually really believed in me. You know, I showed up in Milano. I didn't know anybody. I didn't speak any Italian. I knew no one. And I got there, and Calvin really took a liking to my photos. You know, some of the other agencies wouldn't even give me tests because I wasn't doing real test photographs. I was doing artistic photographs, but they weren't necessarily considered test photographs. But Calvin understood that because he had an eye for that. So then eventually I ended up meeting the Versace family because a makeup artist friend of mine was in town, and it was a makeup artist from Bruce Weber named Bonnie Maller. Okay. And she knew I was there. So she called me up. She's like, why don't you come over and meet these guys? So I go over to Via Gesù, and I met Paul Beck, and Paul Beck and I clicked like that. You know, he grew up in Long Island. I grew up in New Jersey. We're both in Milano. And we kind of clicked. He's like, hey, we're launching this new line of clothes tomorrow called Versus. He says, we're going to set up a rock stage in the garden, and we're going to place all the male models all around the stage in between the musicians. He said, why don't you come and take some photos? They didn't hire me, but they were like, oh, yeah, come and take some photos. So it was all the guys that I knew from the time in Milan. It was like Josh Holloway, you know, that period of guys, and they were all my friends. So I talked to all the guys, and I'm like, guys, help me out. I need to take some kick-ass freaking photos. So they all helped me out because they were my buddies. So we did that. I took all the photos, and it was getting into July. And as we know, Milano closes down in August. Yeah. And I hadn't really worked. So I said to myself, you know, I don't know if I'm going to come back or not. Because, you know, I was there for 8 months with no work. You know, how long do you give it before you give up? Yeah, sure. So I was kind of like, okay, I'm not sure if I'm going to come back. Maybe I have to go back to New York with my tail between my legs. So I bring the contacts to Paul Beck from the Versus show afterwards, and he's flipping through them. He's like, wow. He's like, these are pretty good. So I'm like, well, thanks. He's like, okay, well, we want you to come back in September and shoot the women's show and shoot the press release, all this kind of stuff. I'm like, oh, okay. Okay. So, you know, at that point, it was September, it was the women's shows, and it was all the big girls. It was, you know, Linda, Naomi, and Christy, and Cindy, and, you know, and I'm standing there and doing photos, you know, of this young kid from New Jersey, and I'm there with my camera, and I have, you know, 20 of the most beautiful women in the world in front of my face. And I'm like, how the hell did this happen? You know, I was kind of in shock by the whole thing. Right. But it was good. You know, it was really exciting. But we did a lot of backstage show photos. I would set up a studio backstage. So at one point I did that with the men. And I set up a white sheet out on the terrace in the sunshine. And we had all the guys, you know, all the guys coming through, and I was photographing them all. And I brought the photos to Johnny afterwards, and he liked them so much that he wanted to use it for the men's campaign. So all of a sudden, then, bam, I had the men's campaign. And people are looking, you know, because Versace was shot by Bruce. It was, you know, Herb. And it was Avedon. It was all these big photographers. Then you had
Herb,
this one
Herb. I think Herb shot.
Herb, exactly. Herb, you know, the big ones. And then you also had this guy that was shooting the men's campaign named Ordway. And everyone's like, who the hell is this person? So that's what got me started at shooting, you know, not just the press releases and backstage at the shows, is the fact that he liked the photos so much that he wanted to use it for the campaign. And this is leading into how it all started with Miami.
Yeah, tell me how that transition, because, I mean, yes, I understand all the stuff you shot in Milano, but what triggered the whole Miami situation?
The whole Miami thing happened because Johnny had visited Miami and fell in love with it. And he was, you know, meeting a few people there. He ended up becoming good friends with Richard Pullman at Ari Marine.
Oh my God, Richard.
He's in LA. You know, and all the guys were down there. They're healthy. They look tan. You know, that was the beauty of shooting the people that are based in South Beach. because they look so good. Instead of flying in a guy from New York in January that's all pasty white looking and not so healthy looking. So that was kind of the beauty of that. But what happened, Johnny came back to Milan after visiting Miami, and he also decided that he wanted to send me on my own with those big, huge cases, you know, those they call coffins, filled with leather and silk printed shirts and all that kind of stuff. And he and I were in his office, and he went through a bunch of art books and photo books, and we looked through things for ideas. And he gave me a few of the books. He's like, okay, go to Miami. And he sent me to Miami. No one came with me. I booked local hair and makeup and all that kind of stuff there. Richard was with me on the shoots, but there was no client. It was kind of like a test for me, I really think. You know, he wanted to see what I could do. But for a client to do that, especially now, can you imagine to send a photographer off without being on set? It never happened. Never happened. But he fell so in love with those photos. That was the whole series of all the guys in leather, you know, on Key Biscayne, and the guys walking the streets and all the printed shirts. That was all that series of photos. And he fell so in love with those photos that he wanted to save a lot of the photos, not use it for a campaign, but keep it for the South Beach Stories book.
Right.
So we did that. Afterwards, we continued doing more shoots there, because then afterwards, you know, he wanted to shoot women. So I had Christy Turlington, Kate Moss, and, you know, the big girls of the moment. That's all these roller skating photos we would do, and on the diving platforms, all that kind of stuff. So that's how all that really happened. You know, he originally sent me on my own. He loved the results, and he wanted me to continue.
So you're telling me that all those shoots, most of those shoots, the client wasn't there. It was all you.
The first round,
okay.
Just for the first round, the client wasn't there. Then we went back again. I think it was in August. We did some more men's stuff, and it was everybody. It was Donatella and Angela Zena and Paul and Bruno Bujani and all the people that were the core of Versace.
The family.
So they came, and of course, with the women, Donatella's going to come. You know, of course.
Of course.
You know, if it's Kate Moss and Christy Turlington, Donatella's going to be there.
Yeah. Now, question: how did you go about your casting of these men? I mean, obviously, I know that a lot of my boys are in those photographs because, you know, I always came to you, and every time I had a really, you know, new guy that I thought would be great, you know, whether it was a Maximo, Horatio, the Troy Casey's, all these guys. But how did you go about your casting and choosing who you would take for these jobs?
Well, the first time I went, Johnny said, work with Richard. You know, work with Richard. He's going to organize all the guys, get them all set. And like I said before, the guys there all look so great because they were tan and healthy and in shape. So Richard would pretty much organize the guys. But one of my favorite, Richard sent me a guy with one Polaroid, 16-year-old kid, one Polaroid. Beautiful kid, Hansel Rodriguez. Remember Hansel Rodriguez?
Of course.
I saw this Polaroid, I saw this kid in front of my face, and I'm like, damn, book him, confirm him, don't even ask anybody else. Yeah. You know, and he became, you know, one of the major figures of that period for South Beach Stories, and the men's campaign we were doing there was all about Hansel.
Oh my. So it's very great, funny, because thinking now, you know, thinking back on some of these guys that you worked, you know, earlier you mentioned Josh Holloway.
Who was always one of my favorite. I always loved working with Josh.
Fantastic. What a lovely, lovely guy he is. Always so polite every time I saw him. You know, he was in my agency for a minute. But I remember a particular set of guys, Maximo, Horatio Ladon, Horacio.
Of course, Horatio.
James Hyde.
Of course, James. James was also very good friends with the family at the same time. You know, he wasn't just a model for them. He was friends with Donatella and Paul. He was very close with them.
And it's funny that you mentioned about bringing the guys from New York versus the guys that are in South Beach, because you're right. You had, you know, these guys were all in great shape. And what I want to ask you is, were you the type who brought the guys in and have them probably stay a day or two to get some color
Well,
Because I
that's,
remember
I mean,
Bruce
that's
used
what
to,
Bruce did that all the time.
yeah, Bruce
It was
used
the
to do
first
that
2 or
all
3
the
days,
time.
everyone was just laying out and getting tan.
Yeah,
But
I learned that from Bruce. Whenever I would meet a guy and I would say, "Oh, gee, go get some sun." Oh, if the sun is bad, dude, go get a tan. Everybody looks good with a tan. You got white skin. You're gonna look good with a tan. Trust me. And it always worked. But these guys that you had, the Troy Caseys and the James Hyde, like, I mean, these guys were all always perfectly tan, incredible bodies, always in shape, incredible shape. And I believe that allowed you to do some, these iconic photographs that you shot in South Beach. You got the light, and then you have these incredible, and more importantly, I noticed you always had guys who had incredible vibes. Their vibes were, if you were a deadbeat, you're not working with Doug Ordway. You better bring a vibe, bring some positiveness and just some smooth swag. And you had that. And I call you a composer because you compose these. The late Kurt Marcus, I mentioned it yesterday on the live with Bruce Halls. He taught me that word. He said, great photographers don't take pictures. We compose images.
that's true.
And that fits you because you compose these images. It never dawned on me until you brought it up earlier to shoot 7, 8, 9, 10 guys in one photo and nail it. Whoa. Talk
It's a
about
challenge.
art directing.
It is a challenge. But that's like you said before, Bruce Weber did that quite often. What he would do is he would have all the models and he would just let them hang out in different places. So somebody would be doing something naturally and he would see it and he would run for it and take the photo. It was all about getting it natural so it didn't look posed. Because as soon as you pick up a camera, everyone changes.
Yeah.
You change your face, you change your mouth, you think you have to look better than you really look, where you don't have to. If I'm coming up with the camera, it's because I'm seeing something I like. Don't change it. Keep doing what you're doing, and don't change thinking you have to change it because it's a photo.
I like that because people freeze. The minute I always tell models, stop staring at the camera. Don't stare. Create a character, stay in character.
Yeah.
Let the photographer, a true photographer, a true master, a true composer knows exactly what he wants and he will capture that. But a lot of models tend to stare at the camera and that's when you get that dead eye.
And you get the tight mouth because people instantly change their mouth when a camera's in front of them. So that's why you do this whole thing where you open the mouth, relax all the muscles in the mouth. I would get them to do that constantly. Open your mouth wide, stretch out the muscles so it doesn't get that tightness. But going back to what you said before about the personality was major important to me. If it was a person I didn't like, I couldn't take a good photo of them. Even if they were the most beautiful thing that you've seen, if I don't like that person, if I don't get a good vibe from that person, it's hard for me to take a good photo. I don't know why, but it's just the case. So the personality, it's always important for me. A lot of times people just direct book and they wouldn't have met the model, any of that kind of stuff. I never did that. I always had to meet the model beforehand because I wanted to see how we vibe together. Because it is a vibe between the model and the photographer. It's a relationship that you're having when you're doing a photo shoot. And if those, your personalities don't blend, then how are you supposed to have any kind of relationship?
Brings me to the next question. You said I always had to meet the model. And I agree with that because you want to create a vibe with this person. How do you translate that in today's world where we're in this new world of digital and I'm trying to figure out where's the humanity in today's business versus what we had in the 70s, 80s, 90s where everything was personal, everything was via a telephone, and then
Mm-hmm.
you met people and you could feel the vibe right away. I don't believe you could create that vibe via a self tape. So, how, please tell me in your words, how do you feel about the state of photography and the state of the modeling industry today? How do you view it?
Oh, okay.
Ooh.
Um, that's something that's something I got a lot of feelings about.
Right. I know you
Um,
do.
Back in the day, I had relationships with people like you or with Calvin, and I come and I'd hang out in the agency. We go to lunches together all the time and do all that kind of stuff. What changed a lot of that, the first thing was email. Everyone started emailing everything. You never got on the phone, you never met in person, and everyone got used to that system. So there wasn't as much of a personal connection with the people that are helping you put together the shoot, people like yourself. So, um, what was the, what, tell me what the question was again. I lost
We
track.
want to pretty much weigh in on how it used to be to what it is today, where I don't feel that there's that much humanity in it because, for instance, these days castings are all self-tapes. Nobody meets
Right.
anybody anymore. They're like, "Oh, send me a self-tape." By the way,
I disagree
Marpesa
with
is
that.
sending her love. Marpesa is on the live. She just joined us, and she
Marpessa,
says,
hi,
"Ciao, bello,"
honey.
who
I
we
miss you,
love.
Marpessa.
So I want you to weigh in on that. Could you book a guy, Dougie, just because he sent you a self tape?
I mean, if there's someone like you that could tell me about the personality, maybe. But I really, even today, I want to meet people. I want to meet people because I want to see how well we click together. And it's difficult. I mean, the way the industry is now, things have changed so much that it really takes the personal side out of it, which I don't like whatsoever. Like what I was saying before, Johnny sent me on my own to go and take these photos. These days, they're not even just trusting your eye. Back in the day, they trusted the photographer's eye. They knew the work and they trusted that. Like people like Bruce, for example, wouldn't even take a Polaroid because he wanted them just to trust what he was seeing with his eye and what he was looking through in his camera. Now it's at the point where, you know, the clients are seeing the photos even before you are because they're watching the monitor while you're there shooting and they're judging it before you even get going with it. We all know that the first few frames are usually not the best. Once in a while you get in the first one, but you need to build into it. But when you already have people questioning it, when you haven't even had the time to build it, create the
The
flow,
momentum.
change the momentum for it. Exactly. So that's really changed a lot. That's one thing that I absolutely hate. Even sometimes when you're having to instantly process out JPEGs and send them to the corporate office in New York, for people to judge while you're on the shoot. For me, it's like those people are not even on the shoot. They don't know what the energy is. They don't know what we're going for. They don't know what we're trying to build this into. So how can they be sent a JPEG to judge your photo when you haven't even been able to build on it? So it's tough. It's a lot of the personal side has been taken out, and that's, I think that's part of the reason I don't enjoy it as much as I do. I still greatly, greatly enjoy it, but there was so much more enjoyment because, like I said before, they just trusted you. They trusted your eye. They let you do what you do, and they would wait to get the contact sheets, later on when it was due time, and then look through them.
And funny enough, because via the contact sheets or the slides, whatever you send, you will see the process and the build up to, whoa, look at
Completely.
this, as opposed to what you just said, someone standing behind you looking at a monitor. You taking the picture, they're already looking at the monitor and judging your photos. And it's like, wait a minute, what gives you the, I mean, sorry, you are the client, but Like, where is your experience in
Yeah.
photography? Or
And then they're telling you, well, maybe if her hand goes an inch lower, like that specific, where, leave that to me. Let me do that. Let me direct the model. Let me work it into that. But what I always used to do when it was filming Polaroids, I would take a Polaroid in the very beginning, and I wouldn't show that to the client. I would take it just so I could see the light, see what was happening, see what was going on. And then once I knew how that photo was working, at the end, I'd take another Polaroid. And that's what the client would see. Because if you showed them that first Polaroid, they'd be like, this is shit. But I knew it was shit because I was just looking at it for the light and, to figure out what I wanted to do. By the end, I had figured it out and I knew I got that great shot. So I'd always take a Polaroid in the end just for that reason. So you could show the client actually what it's going to look like. But with this whole bit with digital, that's impossible because like we were saying, they're watching the monitor and seeing the photos even before I see them.
a gentleman is asking a great question. Will you say that today you don't have artistic freedom?
That hits it right on the head. That hits it right on the head.
That's a question that just came in. How do you feel about that?
Well, I mean, even back in the day when it was, when we were shooting, it was Donatella and Angelo and Paul Beck, and we were a close-knit group. Now you're on the set and you have, the client and the marketing director and the PR director and the digital director and all these people,
all these titles
that you have to please all these people. What happened to the time when you have a great client that you work with very closely, like myself and Donatella? We would just go and we would do it without anyone else questioning it. And that's made things a lot more stagnant. I mean, I think the quality of imagery now is nowhere near the quality they used to be.
I agree.
Nowhere near. Plus, back in those days, we were shooting to do a magazine, to be published in a magazine, and that magazine would be sitting on the shelf for a month. So that image needed to stand for a month. Now it's all you're doing is flipping. So somebody's seeing that image for 1 second and it's gone. They're already flipping on to the next. So that's the trouble with it now. A lot of times when you're shooting for clients, you're shooting for Instagram because they're putting everything on. The main purpose is to put it all on Instagram, some on the website, that kind of stuff. But it's not like you're shooting a cover of a magazine that's going to be there standing on a shelf for a month, or publishing a book that's going to be in someone's library for a lifetime. It's just all too quick, and it's the quality has just gotten lost because of that fact, and about too many people having input. You need to trust the person, the main person who is taking that photo. You need to trust that person, and if you don't trust that person, don't hire them. You think you can do, there's been times where I've taken the camera and been like, okay, you think you could do better? Here you go. Take the camera, you do it.
Well, I've heard of photographers that have done things like that. Like, listen, you hired me, let me do what I do.
Exactly.
You think you could do better? Here's the camera.
Exactly.
Well,
or if you want me to do work like somebody else, sometimes they come to you and say, we want you to shoot it like Mario Testino shot it. Okay, then hire Mario Testino because that's what he does. Don't come to me and say, we want you to shoot like him.
Oh God, that's like the ultimate.
That's happened to me before in the past. Where they've been showed me an image and said we want to shoot it like this, and I said no. It's not right for for photographers to do that. Personally between us, you don't want to be like copying off of somebody else's work. You want to support each other, yes, but if you want that style of work, fine, great, hire that photographer. Don't come to me. This is what I do, and the other person does something else. They're both beautiful, but if you want, to go a different way, then go a different way.
Yeah, I believe that's extremely. Raymond Lee, who I don't know if you remember Raymond Lee, the amazing stylist who did some most iconic photographs with Herb and with Matthew.
Yes, I know the name. I don't think we ever met.
Yeah, well, I was with him last night. Matter of fact, he's one of the most incredible genius minds I know. And we discussed things like this where, Dougie, it's killing me, brother. It's killing me because, you know, of course we come from an era of masters where we not only loved the master's work, but we appreciated their imagery. Everything was about making images. And how difficult it must be for someone like yourself who's known for having that signature Doug Ordway photograph. I mean, I would always flick through a magazine and I could tell, oh, that's Dougie. Dougie shot that. Like I would know, as compared like today, where you know this is it. This is it now.
Yep.
And then, you know, let's get into some filters, some contrast. Press the button, voila. So where do the master? Where? How do you create? How do you become a master photographer these days? How do you do that?
My generation of photographer and the generation prior to me, we created imagery in front of your face. The position of the person, the way the light is hitting, all that kind of stuff. We did it right there in front of your face. You know, now it's this whole mentality, oh, don't worry, we can change it afterwards. No, we're going to do it here in front of your face. That was what, you know, when I first started with Versace, there was no retouching, nothing, absolutely positively nothing was retouched. So it was up to me to make sure the light was hitting the face right, you know, and it was the 90s, and sometimes people would be out partying all night before they come to the set, and it'd be dark under their eyes and all blotchy and whatever, and you had to figure out ways to fix it with lighting, to fix it with angles. You didn't depend on, you know, doing this whole Adobe Photoshop afterwards, which is going to correct everything. For me, I hate retouching. You know, I think if you can't get it right there in front of your face, then what are you doing? You know, as a photographer, you should have that ability. You know, and like I said, my generation prior, we had that ability to get it right there, right then. Not thinking about, okay, we'll fix that afterwards. Or with the group shots. This is a perfect example with the group shots. Happens so frequently now where one person is not looking right. They're like, oh, no problem. We'll take the head from another image and bring it over. No, get the fucking shot, you know, right there, right then. You know, don't depend on Photoshop for everything.
Film versus digital. Your take.
Film is so much more touchable to me. You know, I shot everything, which I learned from Bruce Weber, on transparency film, which wasn't a common film to be used for artistic purposes. It was more for catalogs and stuff like that, because you didn't have to make prints. It was more budget friendly. But you could manipulate that film to such a degree. You know, all the stuff we did in Miami was so bright colors and vibrant and all this kind of stuff. That happened because of transparency film. You cannot get the same thing out of digital. If you get a really good retoucher, afterwards they can tweak it and do it and make it look similar to that. But for me, the digital is not as touchable.
Are there retouchers still in business?
Yeah. What do you mean?
I mean, are we just changing the name? I mean, retouchers are now digital creators who just digitize, you know.
Oh, you're talking about retouchers that used to do the painting on the prints.
Exactly.
No, I mean that's long in the past.
That's gone.
Long in
so
the past.
When you shoot film now, because I'm sure you still love to do, you know, shoot film.
Yeah.
Who does? Who does the retouching?
Well, then it's scanned and then they digitally retouch it. I mean, Versace asked me this recently. I went for the shows, and James Roper, who's the image director of the company, said to me, I really want you to shoot film. I've always loved what you do in film. I can see the difference of the quality. He was able to see it. So he wanted me to shoot film, and you could see it. It's much more touchable. It's the only way I could describe it. So, I mean, if it was up to me, I would have never even got into the digital. You know, I started shooting digital because I had to. You know, the last time I went back to Milan and worked for a good period of time, I moved back to Milan, got reconnected with Versace again, and they said, okay, you can come and do everything, but it all has to be shot in digital. You know, I didn't know that much about digital at that point, but I said, yeah, sure, no problem. And I went and I faked it, you know, and I was able to do it.
Another great question someone asked: when is the book coming?
Did Marpessa ask that?
No,
Marpessa's been pushing me for years and years to do a book. She has been so supportive, and she sees all these photos that I post on Instagram. She's like, "When are you doing a freaking book?" This is something I've been pushing for literally decades. To go back to the old imagery in the 1990s, we used to shoot so much for Versace back in those days, because there was the shows Versus, Estante, Versace, and then Atelier Haute Couture. So there was 4 shows, both for men and women. I mean, the men didn't have Atelier, but had all the other lines.
Sure.
So you had that many shows. I was shooting the rehearsal and the show itself, setting up a studio backstage, doing reportage around. During the rehearsal, I would take some runway because I had access to the whole place without the audience. I would follow the models down the runway. So there's so many images that have not been released or haven't even really been seen. So that's something that has just been discussed recently, which I'm very excited about. Like I said, I've been pushing for this for almost decades, to go back into all the old photographs, go through everything again. Because even with Johnny had so much going on. He would choose a photo, put a check with a grease pencil, and then would move on to the next thing, without really looking. You have to look with the loop, and you have to check out how the fingers are looking and all the different facial expressions, especially with the group shots. You can't just look at it and pick one. You have to look at each individual face and make sure everyone's looking good in that photo.
Sure.
So I think a lot of stuff has been overlooked because of that reason. So I just got word last week that Versace is ready to do that. We're going to go. I'm going to Milan for 2 weeks in July, and we're going to dig through all the archives of photos. I have all the black and white negatives, but all the color stuff, since it was shot on slides, there's one original. There's only one original that you don't have a negative to go and do prints of afterwards. So a lot of those originals are exclusively in Versace's archives. So now what we're going to do is go through it all and figure out the best way to make use of it, through a book, through exhibits, through, who knows where we can go.
Definitely want our audience to get hip to look through your website. Mm-hmm. And I know you have a section called the Versace Unseen.
Exactly.
And it is phenomenal.
Brings back a lot of memories, doesn't it?
Brother, I loved it when it brought so many memories. Sometimes I got melancholic, sometimes I got happy, sometimes I just looked at it, I'm like, oh my God, I was right there. Or, so it brought some amazing memories. I want to see this come to life 100%.
Well, I've had offers in the past. Harper and Collins, they were interested in doing a book after seeing my Instagram, but it wasn't the right timing for Versace at that point, and the only way they would do it, like I said, I have all the black and white negatives. The only way they would do it is if I was able to access all the material that was in Versace's archives. So now it's the time to go, and we're going to do all this in person and discuss what the best thing is to do, because I think they're really going back to exploring their history, cataloging their history. I mean, the company has such a huge history that why wouldn't you want to, make sure that you're protecting the historic imagery of the company?
Exactly. For everyone joining us, please tell them your website.
My website, well, my main website is dougordway.com. And then I have a separate website, which is all the Versace images from the 1990s, called VersaceUnseen.com. And in there, a lot of the pages, I went back to Milano, about 2 years ago, I think it was, maybe a year and a half, and I still have my black and white printer named Giancarlo Vaiorelli. He's still there and still printing old school black and white prints. So he and I went through the negatives, and we printed a lot of this stuff up, to more so prepare it to launch into the art world or produce a book with it, instead of, we're not doing it to necessarily put on Instagram or anything like that. We're into, doing stuff that's more, that stands more through history versus something you just flip through. So we're doing that. And he does the old style of printing. You know, there's very few people that still do it. The man's a genius. He's the best at black and white printing that there is.
Where is he? In London or Milan?
He's in Milano.
In Milano.
So,
okay.
So a lot of the stuff on the Versace Unseen, a lot of the pages there are stuff that he and I printed recently, about a year and a half ago. And then there's other pages that is just all the published work through the years.
Fun.
You know, and I called it Versace Unseen. You know, there's some stuff that's been seen, but there's so many things that we're putting in there that have never been seen, that have never been, you know, released. No one's ever got their eyes on them except for me, or you know, or Johnny, or you know, whoever else at Versace. So, you know, that's why I called it Versace Unseen, because you know, a lot of the material that we're going to be coming out with is unseen material. Because there was a lot of things like, for example, the Haute Couture shows. I was always shooting back at the Haute Couture shows, but they never did an Haute Couture catalog. You know, they did a campaign, like Stephen Meisel would shoot the campaign or something like that. But I was doing all this backstage imagery, which never got used. So we need to go now, you know, I'm excited to go now and dig through boxes and find out where all those photos are. Because there's some great photos in there that just never, you know, never got published.
Unbelievable. Dougie, I can't wait to see you again, brother. I know we haven't seen each other.
It's been a while.
Yeah, it's been over 5 years.
Yeah.
And
I was living out there.
I remember we got to spend some great times together in the late 2010s, whatever that was. And I was very honored. I remember you took a photo of my son. That was, really funny.
I did indeed.
You said, oh yeah, let's get some models. Oh, Omar, no, let's just do your son. He has a 12 o'clock call time. He shows up at 4 o'clock. How long is this going to take? It's like, oh, God, Dougie, you better get this one quick. And you got it done so quickly. And I really appreciate you. I mean, for the many reasons, I could name 50 reasons why I appreciate and love you so much. But thank you for that opportunity.
Of course.
And more importantly, thank you for joining us on this incredible platform called Era, which is, what a perfect name for us to shine the light.
I mean,
on
so many of us in that generation that have these great stories, which will never happen again.
Yeah. So
to bring that all together, everyone telling their stories of how things used to be. Maybe it'll influence what's current.
Exactly. And with that said, I want to thank you, Doug. I want to thank the team at Era, Nadia for creating this platform, the staff at Major Models, and Dougie, we shall dance again, and I cannot wait to see you, my friend.
We'll always reconnect. We always have. We always will.
Do.
I mean, the many years we've known each other at this point, you know, how can it be any different?
Amore, bacione.
Anche te. Un grande bacione.
Ciao, bello.
Thanks, Omar.
Bye, honey. So, with that said, I would love to say thank you for everyone who joined us. Thank you for the team at Era for putting this together. And get ready for tomorrow. We have a very special show. It's called Then and Now, where I host, and I will be discussing something very interesting about then and now. And just remember this word, perpetuity. I'll take it from there. For now, I want to leave you with my daily message, which is one love. Thank you for joining. See you tomorrow. Ciao.